Hello, good evening. Thank you, everybody, and welcome again to this special stay-at-home edition of the Art of the Storyteller. And I'm going to you'll be relieved to know, as well as mentioning we're now in day 50 of the quarantine over here in Spain, the stay-at-home, as I say, quédate en casa, as I say it here, and this lovely change in the world caused by our good friend the coronavirus. And I've got things to talk about. I've got things to mention. I've got things to bring up, and also opinions to give on a variety of writing and non-writing related topics this week. So it looks like my daughter's bathed the floor with Coke. Never mind. It's all sticky. It's like one of those cheap bars you go to in a certain part of your country where they have those sort of cheap sticky floored bars. But obviously, I'll begin with talking about my work and my opinions on that, and also how those opinions may be of use and affect you. First of all, those more observant amongst you may have noticed that I have started to develop a bit more time to my original Hegemony series. For those of you who may not have been paying as much attention to that, it is simply a series. It's, shall we say, it's somewhere between space opera, speculative fiction, high fantasy, and high science fiction. It runs around the premise of, as speculative fiction does and alternate history does, what would happen to our world if one event in history occurred a little differently. Oh, and by the way, I've got a special guest today. She's sleeping, and we don't want to move her. And I can tell you now, an earthquake would not wake that girl. So that's my daughter, Amber. She's very happily asleep there in her lovely dress. And she will be assisting us in the video today, just so you know. But yes, so the idea, as you know, of speculative fiction and alternate history is that one key event in history occurs differently to the way, in fact, it really did. And I chose as one of my main events, the thing that did not change, that had changed and occurred differently, is that Alexander the Great did not die in Babylon, as we know he did in 323 BC, or BCE, or whichever acronym for ages of the world you would like to use. At that period in time, he didn't die under somewhat much debated and mysterious circumstances. And then I decided to take it a bit further, and as I started to write the Hegemony series, or as those of you may know, having looked at my profile on Amazon, I started with short stories and then a sequence of novellas. The short stories with original of our world, again from a different perspective. And writing the Hegemony series was a challenge in so many different ways it's impossible to describe. But the basic, and we'll come back to those maybe either later on during this episode or in later episodes, because I think there are useful things and interesting things for us to consider from a writer's perspective, from a world building perspective, and little tricks that I picked up along the way that come in handy with that. And I've blogged about these as well, but it's nice to put them in the videos because it's just easier to see, isn't it? But the premise is that, and I decided to completely go on a fantasy route from that point and have Alexander encounter something unimaginable after he leaves Babylon, crosses the entire of the world, and as we know, his ambition, from what we are aware, was to conquer the world from sunrise to sunset. And in his understanding of the world at the time, sunrise would be the sea of what we would call today the Sea of Japan, on the far edge of China, and sunset would be the west coast of Ireland. Yeah, the west coast of Ireland. So going there from one side to the other of the world. That was pretty much what they knew about the world from what we know. We may be completely wrong. Obviously, the thing with history, and that's one of the barriers I encountered when I was writing this, or one of the challenges, should I say. The thing about history is our perception of history is changing all of the time, especially with technology allowing greater collaboration and greater depth of research, especially things like what we call genetic archaeology and things like that. Sorry, my interruption. I can't remember the exact term that I've used it, but it is the idea of archaeology, paleontology, and genetics all coming together and using the study of genetics to help us in our studies of archaeology and history. It's extremely interesting, and I dived into it with great enthusiasm in order to give me, shall we say, realism and accuracy in the Hegemony series. When we're dealing with something that begins in the ancient pre-Greek period and extends into a period that's about 250, 300 years into our future, from our point of view, even though clearly the calendar has to change, because events which we used as markers for calendars were changed when the world changed. Things I mention as an example and challenges I faced that I had to think about would be things like if Alexander's empire had not have been extinguished, then the conditions that allowed for the rise of the Roman Empire would never have existed, for example. And there are many other things, but I'd be spoiling the Hegemony series a little bit too much if I gave too many of them away to you. And oh yeah, as well, it is now week 4 of me not touching a single cigarette and only touching vapes, of which I am extremely proud. It's the quarantine goals, my friends. That's my quarantine goal, to be a non-smoker and an occasional vape by the time we're out of this quarantine. I'm doing well, I personally. What are your quarantine goals? Let's talk about them in the comments. I'm sure we all have one. But so yes, so I started digging and diving. I had previously done some heavy edits on the first 3 volumes of the Hegemony collections, the collection of short stories and poems that I'd initially released on Amazon as my first books, the ones I pulled down out of sheer embarrassment because they were riddled with errors and problems. We live and learn, don't we? That's the first lesson we have to take on board as those of us who wish to be famous authors. Simply the fact that we're going to make mistakes, we're going to do things wrong, and we can either give up or we can find a way to correct those errors and move on and rebuild. So I started, obviously, as you know, I'm working from home. I have a little bit more leeway and freedom in my working schedule than I used to have. And I started, as part of that, to revisit some of the old digital art I've done of Alexander's super soldiers, the Kalshodar, and his bodyguards, the Dracograth. And as well, one of my favourite characters, the actual leader of the Kalshodar, a chap with a very interesting backstory known as Lupernicus. And I sat down and did some fiddling around and some playing. And something wonderful happened, that I ended up developing rather decent 3D models of first the Kalshodar helmet, then with a bit of playing around, I came up with what I call the Kalshodar toolkit, that I put together a 3D model of a Kalshodar, but I kept the elements of that artwork separate so that I could use that to build variant models. So first of all, I did a normal Kalshodar, And then moving bits around and changing bits and replacing bits, I did the model of Lupanikis. And then yesterday I finally was satisfied with the model of the Dracograph, Alexander's personal ceremonial guard, the gold armor giants with a helmet in the shape of a dragon's head. And something I'd like to share with you today, because I'm very chuffed and happy about it. One of my favorite authors out there, someone whose books I've read, whose work I have followed, and whose knowledge and skill I am in great awe and respect of, took a look at some of my artworks today and said these are bloody good. And it started up a conversation with some of his followers, some of his friends, who actually love my work. And there is nothing better than someone in our position, having someone who we have admired, who we have read, who we've respected, look at what we're doing and looking at our journey at the stage in which it is and saying, good on you, my friend, you're doing well. And I consider Laurie as a sort of minorly friend stroke acquaintance stroke someone I get on all right with, but we don't really know each other that well, but we will we'll converse, we'll chat, and we'll have a laugh, and I'll wind him up, he'll wind me up. And there's a lesson in that for you, my lovely viewers. Don't be afraid. Don't ever be afraid of the people in our profession to whom you look up to. You'll see if you're a regular on Twitter like me, Stephen King is a regular, Neil Gaiman is a regular, and several other people are. I have, on those of you who can remember that far back, that volume of poetry I released about 3 Christmases ago, called Quoth the Raven, Beleep You Poe. Ha ha ha, very funny. I've just re-released that on Amazon with a slight change to the cover, which includes a bit of blurb from Ian Irvine, a very famous Australian author and oceanographer. And I've just re-released The Wandering Wanderer, the first of the Hegemony collections, with another blurb, another review from a good friend of mine, Mr. Chapman, who is, shall we say, rather well known in many circles, Hollywood producer and writer. How did I get this? Because I managed to form through just dropping it, let's just say with Mr. Irvine, I chatted to him before. I can't remember how we built up a conversation. And I sent him an ebook copy of F.U. Poe. Ian proceeded to read it and give me his honest opinion about it. And he liked it, which is why the feedback I got from him went on the cover. With Matt, he and I formed an unlikely acquaintance. From me working on a technical support desk and him having printer problems, he rang me up, we both having English accents, chatted for a while, had a bit of a laugh, talked about Monty Python, talked about the Goonies, talked about Not the 9 O'Clock News and all that great comedy of yesteryear. And he ended the conversation, here's my anecdote, by saying, oh yeah, you got my name, my email address. Do me a favor, look me up on Google when this conversation is over, and you'll have a bit of a laugh. And I was just thinking, well, this is a bit of a laugh, but never mind, let's have a look. And I looked, and it's like one of my favourite less known films, starring Charlie Hunnam, and what we consider a limited premise, was written by my good friend Mr. Chapman, which is very funny, isn't it? So, and a similar thing, we talked, and he agreed to unofficially read one of my short stories and give me his honest feedback on it as well, which was both highly encouraging and complimentary and very useful. He suggested an edit or two, and I took those on board and made them. And the final version includes those wise suggestions he had made. That's a lesson I have for you. You can interact with, you can follow, you can comment on and like the tweets, the posts, the Instagram messages and photographs, or whatever social media standard of these people you like. There is absolutely no harm to you or anyone in occasionally saying to them, hey, what do you think? With my, and if you have a look on my Twitter profile and my Instagram and that sort of thing, those of you who follow that, you'll see the Kalshodar series that I put up. I just tagged Laura and a few others in that tweet and just said, hey guys, I very much respect your opinion. What do you guys think about this in terms of consistency, in terms of look, and in terms of evolution from ancient Greek to sci-fi? And they answered. They didn't have to, but they did. Now, had they not answered, I would have lost nothing more than a few minutes of my time it took me to compose that tweet. But, and this is what I say to you all, sending out that tweet here and there, making a little joke at J.K. Rowling, having a little dig or a little smile with certain agents who you may find, you know, there is an agent out there, Miss Jo Unwin, for whom I hold very high regard and whom I hold in very great esteem. That occasionally I do have a little bit of a joke and a mess around with her, as you know, just as a purely no harm done, nothing to come out of it kind of experience. There's no harm in that. Don't get creepy and stalkerish and fanboy on them. They don't want that. But if you just treat them like normal people and just say, listen, if you don't mind, can you have a look at this? And they either will or they will not. That's the end of it. But if you do not ask, if you do not take that risk, do not take that gamble, nothing is going to come of it, is it? And that's something I feel is vital to share in this episode of the Storytellers. Something I feel is very important. You may be a writer, a storyteller, a creator, an artist who's just starting on this journey, but I can guarantee you those people whom you follow, whom you are afraid to directly interact with as if they were some gods with secret knowledge of the writer's art, just because they have been published and you as yet have not, at least by the traditional route, does not mean that they did not begin from the same place that you did. In fact, when they began, many of the resources you have available were not there. Self-publishing, as you know, is a relatively speaking new phenomenon. Well, new phenomenon, even. Sorry, I struggle with that word. I always have. I managed to fix it, but it took some effort. It's a new phenomenon. It's something that's relatively new. Back in a time when many of these authors, writers, and artists whom you admire started out, that was not available to them. You have that available to you. So in some ways, you have an advantage. They do not. Internet marketing is still something that is in its embryonic infant stages, that we're still learning about it. We're still developing new strategies and methods. They never did it by themselves. They always had people who did it for them, or at least the publisher and the agent did. We are now in this age of modern technology and the internet and information age, taking over ourselves much of the work that agents used to do on our behalf. So in some way you have an advantage over these people, that you are mastering or mistressing or othering a media which they have about as much experience in as you do. You know, look at someone like Neil Gaiman, another Brit author, someone I very much respect as well as admire, because those of you who follow him will see he's a very, very humble and genuine bloke. I honestly feel if I were to bump into him in a social setting, I'd get on fantastically with him and with Amanda as well. God, Amanda's one of the most genuine people I've ever seen, I believe, from what I've seen as their online persona. Neil is learning at this moment in time his own marketing strategy, and him and Amanda seem to have developed it together. So they're learning as we are learning. Okay, they are published, they are known, they are famous, they've had a head start. But consider the fact that they are no further along, except that their number of followers has several zeros on the end of it that ours does not. But the fact of the matter is they're learning as we're learning. Consider that. You're starting, yes you are. I'm starting, I'm building up. It's taken me 3 years to get to where I am now. And that isn't very high. We're talking about it's a small hill rather than a mountain, which I have risen to. Maybe a big stone in the middle of a field, not really a hill at all. But the fact of the matter is you don't give up. And consider that. You are going to be convinced that you're right at times. You're going to be convinced you're writing the best story that ever been written. Other times, you may be less convinced of the fact. You may think, what is this god-awful mess that I am creating? You may not. But the fact of the matter is you've got to stick with it. You've got to believe in this, and you've got to use this. That's what really matters. And now I'm going to segue off in a different direction and talk about this very sorry state of the world, because not only has the changes which have occurred in our world presented us with opportunities, with more time on our hands and more time to develop to our passion, but it's also brought us ideas and changes which we may not have considered before. I know it certainly has with me. Me doing more, working from home, not going out very often, has made me wonder. And of course, I realise I've got a platform, though it's not very large, and I should use it positively. And I should make something to do it. I've been doing so. You've seen I've shared my rather groovy pictures of me a la mask and so forth, and shared my, let's say, I'm not shy about sharing my political opinions. I'm sure you're very, very aware of this. And the funny thing is, most people who like my work also have, shall we say, philosophical opinions similar to mine. I won't call them political because I'm not loyal to any political. I can see Amber's feet. Thankfully, you can't see her nappy because I wouldn't like that. But I have these opinions, I share them, and I feel as my platform, I have a duty to help and spread opinions which I think are beneficial to those who read them. And you all out there, whether your platform is 5, whether it's 50, whether it's 500, whether it's 5,000, have a duty to those people who follow you. You've seen there have been several people who have been criticized for their political, philosophical, intellectual opinions. Foremost among those is our good friend Mr. King, whose opinions about the president of his country is something he's never shy about sharing. Or our good friend Miss Rowling, who has got herself into a little bit of trouble with certain gender-based opinions that she holds, or at least that she expressed in a certain way, which did offend members of our society to whom the issue of gender is important. And we have to be sensitive and careful of that, but at the same time, I greatly believe, and give me 2 seconds here, sorry. Sorry about that. I greatly believe that there are two prevailing opinions out there in the world of self-marketing yourself as an artist we hope to be of note one day. There is that believes that you must have a public persona from which you keep all aspects of you that is not directly related to your writing and your character or your persona as a writer separate. That your Twitter profile, your Instagram, your Facebook, your Mastodon, your MeWe, whichever one you happen to use, is purely about your writing and about writing and about your art. That's a fair opinion to have. However, I have noticed, and that I can see the logic behind that, and I'll wind back on myself to finish. I appreciate that because it's seen as we are interviewing with the world at large to be a writer of note, a famous writer, a famous artist. It is effectively our online presence is effectively the interview, the resume, the CV, and the portfolio all in one. So we don't want to alienate future readers by expressing opinions which may offend them. Now, it's well and good, and it's an excellent and good opinion to have, and a good philosophy to have. I disagree with it, as those who know me may well be fully aware. Now let me explain to you why, and I'll break it down. First of all those famous writers, authors, artists, performing artists of different colours and stripes we see out there, the ones I follow and admire have no compunction about sharing their opinions and their beliefs. None whatsoever. And even if they are ones that show them in many circles in an uncomplimentary light, that is who they are. 2. Yeah, I knew what I was doing. Number 2 is my opinions, my beliefs, my philosophy, my intellectual standpoint, my moral viewpoint. Excuse me, I get gassy when I'm doing videos. I don't know why, I'm dry throated or something. For which I apologise to those of you who may have a weak stomach, or shall we say a delicate constitution. So, I have all of these. My writing, as you know, and everybody's writing, reflects these things which we hold dear. Our characters will display traits which we admire. Our antagonists may well embody traits which we have a less salubrious opinion about. Our stories will have as an aim the explaining of a philosophical, moral, religious, political, intellectual journey which we hold very, very dear. And plots and subplots will cover this. Characters will embody these ideals. So, people who may be offended by my personal opinions on social media are unlikely to enjoy what I write. Because those who know me, those who have read me, know I have a very no-nonsense, direct, and straightforward approach in my writing. If I think something is, and excuse my French, and my French viewers excuse my English, bullshit, I will come out, I will say that that is bullshit, and I will tell you why I think it is bullshit. I will honestly give my opinion about things. I will honestly attack injustice where I see it. I will attack any form of equality, racism, bigotry, xenophobia, sexism, gender phobia, hatred, and intolerance in any way, shape, or form. In fact, as the joke goes, I am highly intolerant of intolerant people. That is my bigotry. People who are themselves intolerant have got no time in my head. And those of you who see me in social media will know I have no compunction, I have no hesitation, I have no problem with telling people exactly what I think. And in my writing, I have the same approach. Asmodeus is me with all the filters removed. Julian is me with a calmer viewpoint of certain things. Sable is me with a better vocabulary. Enoch is me with thousands of years of age, which I do not have, and so on and so forth. Sham is me with who has no fear of being judged by anyone. It is just the nature of things. So in my opinion, your online author persona has to be honest. It has to be true. It has to be complete. And to be honest, I have formed online acquaintanceships. And if that term doesn't exist, it's mine. I will use it in my books to prevent you from stealing it from me. Have been formed because of the opinions I express in some regard. And my honesty and my genuineness, because I'm not trying to promote and project a dusty, dry, look at me, no, not look at me, no, that's a bad term. I'm not trying to project a dry, dusty resume-like presence online. I'm just projecting me, and this is me, the person, this is me, the artist. And let's be honest, artists are known for having contentious opinions about things and expressing them with no hesitation. That is what artists are known for around the world, for being controversial. So I think it is important to be honest and open about who you are. And I do so. But of course, I'm not going to tell you that's the only way to do it. That's the way that works for me so far. It may not work for me in the long term, but we shall see. But I cannot do it any other way. Excuse me. I just coronaed you. And that's what I'm leading up to in a very roundabout way. The state this world is in, the stance certain countries are taking, namely mine, or my adoptive country, the one I grew up in, known as the United Kingdom, or England specifically, and the United States, two Uniteds. How they are handling this current crisis is disgusting, it is despicable, it is horrible. I am glad I am residing in Spain right now, where at least our government is taking it and us seriously. But it's one thing I wanted to bring up that I've been thinking about a lot this week. Politicians, media outlets, experts of various types, they exist in their position from the shared delusion that they have a control over things that we as ordinary citizens do not. We keep them in their position by dint of the fact that we believe they can influence and fix things that are beyond us as ordinary human beings. Excuse me. So, In this time where nothing is certain, nothing is controllable, nothing is able to be influenced by our political leaning, our religious, moral, and so forth opinions. These people are panicking. They are panicking because they're losing their grip on us, on their position, their power, their entitlement, as they see it. And they are scrabbling and searching for ways to give us the idea that they are in control. How are they doing this? By presenting to us a very black and white either or scenario. Now, to give you some background, I'm working from home. I worked and still do and still am employed by a call center in the gambling industry. Not a particularly moral place to be working, some may say. I don't care. Keeps those girls in clothes and keeps them in food and keeps my wife happy and us living in this lovely house that we have. One does what one has to do. And it could be worse, couldn't it? But I have been by them given the ability to work from home. So I may have a less urgent involvement in one aspect of this very black and white equation, because I have employment. I have some degree of security for now. But it depends how long this thing lasts. And it is my prediction and warning to you all that this is far from over. Many countries are talking about opening back up, about returning to normal, about ending the restrictions and the quarantine. Dear God, no, not yet. And I'll tell you for why in a moment. I'll get back to my point. They are very much selling us on the idea that they're here, we have the economy and financial security. Here, we have the virus and physical security and health. That these two extremes are separate. That either we can focus on our health, we can quarantine, we can self-isolate, we can stay at home, we can shelter in place and let the government take care of things and help us out, those of us who are unable to work. Or we can reopen the country, restore the economy. Now, on one side of the spectrum, we have those of a more liberal, left-leaning approach who are saying that is slaughter, that is suicide, that is going to kill a lot of people. They're right. The doctors, the medical professionals, the scientists are not in the employ of any country or shadowy organization that wishes to steal our freedom and liberty away from us. They're telling us the unvarnished truth to a degree. On the other side, we have those of more conservative, rightward leaning, shall we say in America Republican, in England Tory, in your country whatever they're called, opinion of things, where their belief is of a more fiscal nature, more business oriented, where they're saying, oh, this shutdown, it is affecting our economy, it is causing people to be able to work and suffer, it's making the rich lose money. They're also right. But where they're wrong is here. Now, what we are facing is a mindless mindless thing. A virus, as I like to call it, is a biological robot. It is not alive. The virus is a container for a strand of RNA, a very primitive form of DNA. It exists to inject that RNA into the cells of the host and replicate itself. It does not think. It does not live in the traditional sense of the word. And it doesn't have an agenda except to replicate itself. It doesn't have a political point of view, it does not have thoughts, it does not have morals. It exists to spread itself as far as it can, and it will mutate, it will alter, it will change to achieve that goal. If it's a very dangerous virus, it will, every step we try and take to stop it, it may or may not mutate spontaneously to prevent that. We already know the coronavirus has 14 mutant strains that we've discovered. So even if we come up with a vaccine, it may not work for all of them. And some of them may be more deadly or virulent than others. So what I'm trying to say here, using my platform to share a message which I feel is important, there is no either or, there is no black and white. There is no way to avoid more sickness, more death, and there is no way to avoid financial difficulty. If a recession is coming, it is coming. It was shown in America recently when they decided to reopen meat processing plants and then within a week close them again because a large proportion of their staff got sick and some of them died. So to me, that was an illustration that it's not that we choose to protect people or we choose to protect our economy. We are coming to the point where it's not going to matter what we do. We are just going to have to weather this. We are going to have to endure it. An analogy I like to use is one that surfers use when the big wave comes. You either fight it with all your might and drown, or you go with it and let it carry you where it's going to carry you and either drown or survive. It's not easy to surrender control. It's not easy to let go and trust in some form of higher power, be that higher power God, be it Allah, be that Yahweh, be that Vishnu, Brahma, be that Buddha, be that Ahura Mazda, be that whoever you would like to call that higher power, or be it fate, be it destiny, be it chance. Sometimes you've got to let go. And that is something we as human beings have great difficulty in doing. I'm terrible at it. I will be honest with you, I'm bloody awful at letting go and not being in control. These wrinkles in my forehead didn't come from nowhere. These are genuine worry and knotting in my brow and thought marks, these. But the fact of the matter is, it's coming to the point where politicians will serve us no good. Experts will serve us no good. People who, the talking heads, the vox populi, the demagogues, the chatterboxes, the loud shouters on Twitter, will do us no good because nobody honestly truly knows what is going on. We are just desperately trying to find what's going on, and we don't know. It's a matter of wait and see what happens. You know, here in Spain, they ease restrictions, and some more shops are opening. People have more freedom. They can go out. Children can go out. These two aren't going anywhere. Me and my wife agreed, because the worst thing that could happen is some of these experts, some of these politicians are wrong. And the day comes when we come home from a very unexpected trip and don't bring one or both of those girls home with us. I'm not prepared to take that risk just so I can feel better about myself that they're not confined and bored. So we talked about it and we decided, no, it's not worth the risk. Experts and scientists still don't know with 100% certainty how COVID-19 is spread and how it is not spread. They don't know how long it incubates in certain places. They don't know how it is mutating and how quickly. I do not want one of these poor girls getting that and going through what I have heard people have gone through and not coming home. Because I decided I feel bad about keeping them in the house, and Daddy gets to go out a couple of times a week to get food and shopping, and they have to stay in here. No, I would rather they were driving me up the wall, keeping me awake all night and preventing me sleeping adequately for work, because I know they're safe here. I know here in the house they're fine, because if Daddy goes out, Daddy wears a mask, Daddy wears gloves, Daddy will wear a jacket even in hot weather. And when Daddy comes home, Daddy takes off his shoes, Daddy takes off his jacket, Daddy takes off his mask, his gloves and his outdoor clothes and puts them in his bag and puts them out on the balcony where the girls don't go. While the girls are locked in this room, or whichever room my wife is there with them, then Daddy washes himself thoroughly in the shower. Then he gives them a hug and a kiss, not before. That's how I keep my daughters safe. And I'm not prepared, because of a feeling of guilt at their confinement at the moment, to not be able to keep my daughters safe. Because that's a nightmare of every parent, and for those parents out there who have lived and suffered that, my heart goes out to you. I'm sorry. I am sorry for what you have lost. I have nightmares about what you have gone through. And I pray, as I'm sure you are praying, that I or no other parent ever goes through that. And I wish you did not have to. And I know nothing I say is going to make it better. But I'm not going to go through that, and I don't think any of you should. I think you should listen to the scientists, because they're our best hope at the moment. They are the ones who are doing what they can to fight this virus, and we need to listen to them, not our politicians. If we are forced to return to work, be bloody careful. Wear a mask even if people look at you funny. Because one thing my wife will tell you about me is I don't care what other people think about me. I have no concerns about other people's opinions about me. I will go to work with my mask on. I will sit next to my colleagues with my mask on, as long as it doesn't prevent me from doing my job. I will travel to and from work with my mask on, and I will continue to do so until I am sure it is safe. And I will continue to follow our decontamination process here at home until I am sure it is safe, until that vaccine is in my hand or in my bloodstream and I know it works. Until then, no. And I don't care if this is unpopular. I don't care if this goes against the politics of anybody. I'm going to do what is right for me and what is right for my family, and what will prevent any people I come into contact with going through the thing that terrifies me most in the entire world. Because I don't want to be the vector that kills someone's granny, kills someone's wife, kills someone's children. Because I'd never know, but it could have been prevented. And I'm going over a little bit now. I am going to stop. And I'm sorry for the shift in tone, but these are difficult times. These are different times. And I use my platform as a writer to share things about writing, my platform as a human being to share things that matter to me as a human being. And never forget that you are both of those things. You're a writer and an artist, you're a human being. You may be a parent, you may well be a brother or a sister or another, a husband or a wife, or another. You can be a multitude of things. Never give in to pressure to not be who you are for a temporary gain. Always be true and honest to yourself, and I guarantee you and promise you that will help you in your ambition, in your passion, in your dreams better than anything else will. Be honest to yourself, be honest to the people you interact with. Tell them who you are, because if you don't show them your writing, most certainly will. That's me leaving it for you tonight. That's Amber saying hello because she's just woken up. As you saw, she just smiled at you. Well, she smiled at Daddy, but you can take it. It's all right. I'll share that moment with you. This is Alan J. Fisher signing off. Thank you for watching. This has been another episode of The Art of Storyteller, and I promise you, the next episode may well be a bit more writing related than this one has been. In fact, I am going to dive into a few things that I think will interest you from a world building perspective. You guys take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay strong. Love you all, guys. Bye bye.